The most successful pirate commander to ever sail the open seas wasn't a heavily bearded European dude. It was actually a former sex worker from China who built an empire so massive, it puts the entire Caribbean pirate scene to absolute shame. Clawing her way to the top, she did. This is Shi Yang, born in the year 1775 in a small coastal city in Guangdong, South China. You see, as opposed to modern luxury ports, China's coast at the time, under the Qing dynasty, was a hot-diggity mess of extreme poverty, corruption, and struggling immigrants. Because her family was dirt poor, teenage Shi Yang ended up lurking on a flower boat, which in Chinese dynasty terms means a lavish floating brothel. Now, there's a super quirky reason why these places were on the water. The ruling Qing dynasty was heavily pushing strict Neo-Confucian moral laws that completely banned prostitution on land in major cities. So the pimps got creative. They built these fancy boats on the water to literally bypass land laws, since maritime law back then was a massive gray area. And local cops were easily bribed. These floating hubs became untouched, legalish zones. It was actually inside these floating brothels that teenage Shi Yang learned psychology, business negotiation, and political diplomacy, skills that would totally change her life later on. And her entire destiny flipped upside down in 1801 when she caught the eye of Zhang Yi, the most feared pirate commander in South China Sea. Zhang Yi ended up proposing to her, or kidnapping her depending on which history book you read. Shi Yang agreed to marry him, but she demanded a condition that was absolutely insane for a woman in China at that time. You see, women back then had zero status, were subjected to the painful practice of foot binding, and were basically treated like property. But our spicy main character demanded absolute co-control and a 50% share of the entire fleet and all the loot. And surprise, surprise, Zhang Yi actually agreed. From then on, she became known as Ching Shih, which literally means Zhang's wife. To lock down their dynasty, the couple adopted a talented young sailor named Cheng Po-sai to be their right-hand man, and they successfully united a bunch of rival pirate gangs into one massive alliance called the Red Flag Fleet. But in 1807, tragedy struck when Zhang Yi was killed by a typhoon in Vietnam. Understandable, nature does that sometimes. Instead of backing down and crying in a corner like a typical Qing-era widow, Ching Shih immediately seized the throne. She pulled some genius political moves, locked in the loyalty of her adopted son Cheng Po-sai, and lobbied the regional pirate bosses so the alliance wouldn't fall apart, and that was a massive success. Under her cold, calculated leadership, the Red Flag Fleet boomed into a monster organization, commanding around 1,800 ships and 80,000 pirates, which completely puts guys like Blackbeard to shame. Ching Shih was able to run things so smoothly because she created a strict, written code of iron laws. One of her most famous anti-mainstream rules was that any pirate who raped a female captive or cheated on and abused the captive he legally married would be immediately beheaded and thrown into the sea. She didn't just make this rule out of empathy. It was a genius military tactic to keep troop discipline from rotting, prevent STDs, and keep the coastal villagers from hating them so her crew could still safely buy food supplies on land. Smart, right? On top of that, Ching Shih implemented a radical system of forced collective wealth. Now, to make sure we are all on the same page, 80% of all looted goods had to be handed over to the central treasury, and the pirate who took it could only pocket the remaining 20%. This system was actually modeled after the traditional Chinese lineage system. It basically worked as social security. If a pirate died in battle, the organization guaranteed that his wife and kids on land would be fed and taken care of, which made her crew fiercely loyal and ready to die for her on the front lines. The Qing government was losing its mind trying to stop her, to the point where they begged the British and Portuguese navies for military backup to crush Ching Shih. But guess what? The Red Flag Fleet completely wrecked and pushed back that global alliance time and time again. Bollocks for the empires, I guess. In fact, Ching Shih ran her pirate empire so professionally, it looked like a modern security corporation. She sold safe passports, special transit passes, to merchant ships who paid a monthly tribute just so they wouldn't get robbed on the open water. Realizing that ruling the seas wouldn't stay safe forever, Ching Shih pulled off the most badass move in pirate history in 1810. She offered peace negotiations to the Emperor of China. She boldly walked right into the Governor General's office on land, completely unarmed, bringing only a few female servants and kids as a diplomatic shield. She knew the government wouldn't dare execute her on the spot because the public would view it as a total coward move. Aren't we daring today, Ching Shih? The negotiation was a mind-blowing victory. Ching Shih and her entire crew received a mass amnesty, were allowed to keep every single bit of their looted wealth, and hilariously, her pirates were actually recruited as official officers in the Imperial Navy. This included Chung Po-sai, who eventually became Ching Shih's new husband after Zhang Yi passed on, who was immediately given the rank of lieutenant. Just like that, they went from public enemies to government officials. After Chung Po-sai died a few years later, Ching Shih spent her retirement years in Guangdong running a massive gambling house and a salt smuggling ring. You see, back then, salt was strictly controlled under a state monopoly and heavily taxed, meaning anyone who could smuggle salt without getting caught using secret sea routes would become filthy rich overnight. Naturally, Ching Shih used all her old pirate connections to dominate this black market. She eventually passed away peacefully in 1844 at the age of 69 due to old age and natural causes, right in her own bed surrounded by her kids and grandkids. Dying peacefully like this makes her a legendary anomaly in history, because if you look at the stats, 99% of the world's great pirates ended up dying brutally, either swinging from a gallows or bleeding out during a chaotic battle at sea. This is the bizarre story of the world's greatest pirate queen, Ching Shih.